some half-forgotten place from my childhood.
I felt like
I remember the code for my locker.
And whereas before you were tapping it every day, yeah.
what came round and this on the last
That's the local bank. It's like deja vu.
Yeah, I'm afraid so.
That's why
I didn't realise it was you around.
I'm against him.
Robert, you're over here. Adam, you're over here.
No, that's okay for John, I'm afraid.
You're still office.
I went back up.
Yes, but because of the camera, we have to do too much on the camera. I'm sure there's a very good reason to yeah.
This one here,
I mean, if we heard, we just like to say, that's fine.
I'm not going to see
You won't be seeing it's back of your head. You already have.
Yeah.
And anybody told you, he would have done.
Two sergeant.
He's off.
For two reasons. One, it's hot in, and two, really like that.
Heating it off.
Oh, it's so hot.
Yeah,
Yeah, right. I've got burning a hole in my screen. All I can think
Where's the building doing you then up there? The 300 odd
I never heard that. The kind of like found that I could go into my room.
well, that's it. Oh, well, we can all say that.
Oh, no,
Right. Is it recording you or not?
No, I have no problem. But if, it finally meets the regulation. Finally. So honesty has occurred.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. My name is Councillor Richard Moore. I'm the chairman of the Strategic Planning and Infrastructure Committee. I have an introduction here I have to read. This is a meeting of the council held in public. It is not a public meeting. We are not able to webcast the meeting in the usual way, but are recording the meeting this evening using Zoom, which is being transmitted live on the council's YouTube channel. A recording of the meeting will also be placed on the council's website within the coming days. The public gallery may be filmed as part of this meeting due to the setup of the camera. However, by entering the meeting room and using the public seating area, you are consenting to be filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and/or training purposes. I have the discretion to stop or suspend the recording of the meeting should this be necessary to maintain the proper running of the meeting. All mobile devices should be switched off or set to silent so that the meeting is not interrupted by ringtones. Anyone intending to film or audio record any part of the meeting is asked to do so in a manner that does not disrupt the meeting. Please refrain from filming the public gallery. There is no fire drill planned, so if the fire alarm sounds, leave by the nearest exit and meet by Wilkinson's. Officers will advise when it is safe to return to the meeting. Please adhere to all social distancing guidelines within the room at all times. So I now move to the agenda. Apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chairman. We have apologies for Councillor Robbins. We did get notification that Councillor Smith will be substituting, but as yet hasn't arrived. So,
Thank you. Declarations of interest. Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chairman. I have been
I have also been lobbying and how everybody's getting lobbied.
Yeah, inundated with emails.
Okay, I'm going to move on to item 3, which is the minutes from the meeting held on Monday, the 20th of December 2021. Is there any issue with the minutes? Agreement to sign the minutes. Thank you. And we're going to agenda item 4, which is the Basildon local plan examination, post-submission modifications consultation. I'd like to make a few remarks on this before we actually start. Before we embark on this, what can only be described as massive agenda of 2,736 pages, although the November 25th meeting was a bulky 650 pages, with a relatively small agenda of a mere 411 pages for the December 20th meeting. I want to make a couple of comments. The local plan examination in public is ongoing, and this committee is being asked to consider additional work that has been undertaken in support of the submitted local plan and requests from the planning inspector. In the period from March 2019, when the local plan was submitted to the Secretary of State, to now, a number of reports have been produced to ensure the soundness of the submitted local plan. These reports can be seen on the examination website under the heading Post-Submission Documents, and are new or updated evidence-based documents. Members of this committee will recall that we considered modifications to chapters 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 12, 14, 15, 16 and 17 of the local plan committee meeting of November the 25th last year. Members will also recall that this committee considered modifications to chapters 8, 13 and 18 of the local plan at the committee meeting held on December the 20th last year. Tonight we're looking at the details of the modifications to chapters 6, 7, 9 and 11. The evidence base that informed these modifications is included in the online only agenda under enclosures 4 to 38. The Council has published on the local plan examination website under the heading Post-Submission Documents a number of new and updated evidence-based documents. Additional evidence, including that being presented tonight, will form part of the local plan examination library, and the public will have the opportunity to comment formally on both the proposed modifications and the new evidence through the post-submission modifications consultation, which will be held in the coming months at the request of the examination planning inspector. I would like to say a few words about the post-submission consultation. The post-submission modifications consultation for the local plan will be an online technical consultation on the new and updated evidence base and the proposed modifications arising from this evidence. This approach has been agreed with the planning inspector. The consultation will be publicised online via the council's website and social media pages, and there will be press releases by the council which can be picked up by the local media. The consultation documents will be accessible digitally on the council's website and on the local plan consultation portal, and will be designed to be as inclusive and accessible as possible. Although physical copies of the consultation documents will not be made available, there will be access to computers at the council's deposit points. These are mainly our local libraries. for the public to view the documents if they do not have their own suitable digital device. Signage will be provided at the deposit points stating key information on the consultation and how to view the consultation documents and make comments. The council will also provide appropriate information to the library staff to enable them to advise and assist members of the public. In addition, representatives from the planning service, as well as the customer service team, will be available at the Basildon Centre to answer questions about the online consultation, as well as to assist members of the public to provide comments online. These approaches will help the council to deliver a digital consultation that is as inclusive as possible. The clear preference is therefore for digital responses to be received to assist the efficient delivery of the consultation. Having said all of this, I can, however, confirm that the planning inspector will accept written responses to the consultation, but obviously the preferred method is online. I'm now going to move to the agenda, and I'll hand over to officers if officers have any comments they want to make on the agenda itself.
Chair, we have an erratum note that we'd like to distribute tonight, and I can summarise what that's about. Members, you have an erratum note from PPE addressing an error in Appendix A of the whole plan viability report. An error in the estimation of Section 106, Section 278 contribution costs on the 3 tested strategic sites at H11, H12 and H17 has been made in the whole plan viability report. This is at line 4.6.2 of the 3 spreadsheets in Appendix A of the report. This erratum note corrects the modelling so that the correct totals of the Section 106, Section 278 contribution costs for the 3 tested strategic sites are modelled. The revised results show no changes in the overall viability results, i.e. the 3 strategic sites all remain viable, as shown by the green cells in table 6.1. One exception, however, is at H11 East Basildon. That might be unviable under the worst case scenario of substantial build cost rises, as shown by the red cell in table 6.2 sensitivity testing. Table 6.3 is now changed to table 6.2. So there are only minor changes in the main report, which includes an update of the 3 strategic site appraisal sheets in Appendix A, example residential appraisals. These revised tables and the changed paragraph 6.12 are included in this erratum note. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. I now propose to go through the proposed modifications to the various chapters in enclosure number 2. And what we've done in previous meetings is I will go through each page and ask members whether they have an issue with any of that, and we'll then have a discussion. So that's okay, that's what we've done in the past couple of meetings. So I'm going to page 31, which is chapter 6, Achieving Sustainable Development, Strategic Policies, Policy SD1. There's some amendments there, as you can see. Do members have any issue with that? I'll go to the next page. Minor amendments on the evidence base, the economic growth, and on page 33, similar changes to the employment, B class, C class, those sort of things. So, yeah. Go to page 34 and 35. Revised or adding in 6.22. Most of 6.21 and 6.26 is new, but revision to 6.27. So, and page 35, some revisions around numbers there. Comments on that? Go to page 36 and 37. Councillor Morris.
Yeah, can I just question on page 37, 6.37, the bit that's added in joining completions and consents in which the town centre have significantly exceeded the identified capacity of 15 to 100 homes and have identified a revised capacity of around 250 to 400 homes in the town centre. Can I just clarify with officers? I'm assuming that the majority of that would be the Runwell Road site and the Wickford Road site, where the Station Road site, Wickford Avenue site, where the community centre and library were previously. Can I just have confirmation of that, please?
Yes, the additional numbers in there relate to the application for library granting planning consent or fact been built since the issuing of the plan. So it does relate to current consent. There's no additional strategic sites or plans to be application.
Okay, thank you for that. We'll move on then to page 38, 39. On those. Page 40 and 41. The settlement hierarchy and distribution of growth. Page 42 and 43. 44 and 45. Now we move to the strategic policy E1, and changes here about future classes and so on. So, any comments on page 48 to 49? Page 50 and 51. We're all to get to the house chapter. 52 and 53. Councillor Allen.
Sorry, Chairman, would you mind, if some of us don't have page numbers, we just have the paragraph numbers, could you read those as reference?
Okay, like 7.12, 7.1, okay. Okay, I'm on page 52, and we're looking at 7.16 through to 7.20, and then the policy E2, paragraphs 1, 2, and 3. Does that work? Okay. Thank you. Then page 54 and 55, this is policy E3 for Dunton campus. We're adding in 7.23, 24, 25, policy E3. And then we've got policy E4, which I think is completely deleted. I'm moving to page 56 and 57, and we've got 7.31 deleted, 7.28 minor addition, 7.33 deleted, 7.29 revised, and policy E4 was E5, as set out there as some minor revisions. Any comment? Okay, page 58, 59, this is policy E5, land east of Burnt Mills. 7.32 is revised, 7.33, 7.34. The old 7.39 has been deleted. 7.36 and 7 and 8 and 9. That. I'm moving to page 60 and 61. Policy E5, land east of Burnt Mills. And that's the policy set out there. And I'm moving to policy E6. Some very minor modifications there on 7.43. Councillor Joe.
Thanks, Chairman. I seem to have missed the point when we went over 6.58. I'm terribly sorry about this, Chair. I would just like to ask specifically, the forum itself, I feel a fair interest. I was a member of this Honolulu Neighbourhood Forum. Can you just explain, you're saying that you're giving Wickford Town Council or the Wickford Parish the ability in which to set out a plan for the area, but the people who own the forum, people who run the forum and own the land and therefore control the destiny of that area, has the land ceased the forum itself. So how can the area continue to exist for a plan to be prepared?
The legislation doesn't give provision to delete a legal area once it's been designated. So in as much as the forum itself doesn't exist anymore, we can't, there's no provision within legislation to delete the area. So it remains that way until whether if the Wickford Town Council wishes to progress with one, then they have the ability to, but otherwise it just, there's no provision to delete.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Jeff, you're okay. Go back to page 61, this is policy E6. Some minor modifications on 7.43 and policy E6 itself. This is term 63, 7.45, we're now talking about policy E7, untidy industrial zone, 7.47, 7.48, and then policy E7, policy 8, that's paragraph 7.51 and 52, and policy E8 itself, page 63. Okay. I'm moving to page 64 and 65. This is policy E9. This is non-B or EG class uses in employment areas. This is 7.53, 7.54. Deleting the old 7.58. Then we've got 7.55, 56. Policy itself, policy E9. And then policy E10, aligning skills and jobs, paragraph 7.61, 7.62, which are deleted, and then we have 7.57 and 7.58, 7.59. Page 66, minor revision to 7.61, policy E10 itself there, some revision there. Amendments okay with that? Now move to page 69, this is chapter 9, promoting sustainable transport. And we've got a revision to paragraph 9.4, this is policy T1, transport strategy. And 9.5, then page 71, revised 9.7, 9.9, 9.10, 9.11, 9.12, 13, 14, and 16 and 17. Councillor Morris.
Just a minor typograph, I should think, at the bottom of page 71 on line 17. If you read the bottom line, it's sort of taking into consideration a total of several junctions. I think that some more deletions need to be made there. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Yes, officers have made a note of that. Thank you. Page 72 and 73, 9.19, 9.20, 9.21, 9.22 and 23, and the transport policy T1 itself. Page 74, we're now moving to policy T2, improvements to highway infrastructure. Page 74, 9.26, 9.27, 9.28. Delete the old 9.29, and I guess that's an additional 9.29, 9.30, 9.31. Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. Just an observation of some of the residents that I've been speaking to of late on this particular issue, and just a general question. If you can, officers can help me out on this one. The question is, can you tell me 100% with the evidence base how many of the numbers housing were for the studies done for Western County Council for Billericay?
The studies didn't look specifically at Billericay, so a whole load of transport test was carried out. That is sets out in Appendix A of that sensitivity test what all the development assumptions were, and that does specify what is Billericay, Basildon and Wickford. I don't have the Billericay number to hand. The total development number at that time was 21,216 homes. However, the strategic allocations that were taken into account are the ones as per set out in the plan. So that was allocations age 16 to age 20 to Billericay. I think there was a question as well about the specific modelling that was done for Billericay Link Road. Yeah. So that sits alongside the local plan sensitivity tests that are done in parallel, and that looks specifically at the impact that Link Road has on local plan allocations. So for that purpose, it looked at allocations age 16 through to age 20, which collectively have 2,754 homes. It also looked at two of the allocations which are in North Basildon, so the allocations north of the A127, which are H9 and H10, Steepleview and Knowbridge, and they provided 645 homes. There is also a small amount of additional development within its background development, which reflects committee and planning applications. So that is set out in the document, South West Billericay Link Road Supplementary Transport Modelling, which is enclosure 28. And it's set out on pages 10 and 11 and in Appendix A.
I've lost where I was
It's not bad.
there. Okay. 74, 75.
Richard, sorry, Andy's got his hand.
Oh, councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't want to help you to continue to lose your place, but just picking up on the link road, can I just ask how satisfied officers are that the work that's being done around the provision of that link road is robust enough, A, to be sensible, and secondly, isn't going to have an adverse impact on the residents of that area based upon the modelling that's being done?
Since the plan was submitted, we commissioned a number of reports. There's an enclosure summary that's been submitted as well, provides a summary of how those reports relate. We've commissioned a technical report, which was prepared by the Highway Authority, which looks at the engineering requirements of the link road, and that's been published as part of this consultation, so it will be open for review and discussion. We've also commissioned the follow-up report I just referred to, which was the link modelling, which looks specifically at how the link road relates to the strategic allocations, both in Billericay and in close proximity in North Hazleton. And we've also commissioned valuation reports to look at the accurate costings of that, which is also published as part of this work. And then finally, a whole local plan sensitivity test has been carried out. So they've all been carried out using the Tempo modelling system, which is recommended by the Department of Transport, and have been carried out by the Highway Authority and have been signed off by the Highway Authority. So we are satisfied with the reports. They will now naturally be subject to consultation and in due course the examination of the local plan.
Thank you. I was going to say that my view and the view of the public is you get people sitting in white rooms that know nothing about particular areas where we do this transport modelling, and when the transport modelling goes in, it turns into a complete car crash. It just would be good to know how robust we are in making sure that this is being done, because I do know the residents do have concerns. There've been a number of issues that have been raised with regards how this is going to be done, and I think we just need to be making sure that we are as robust as possible in ensuring that highways, less their cotton socks, have got it right.
Okay, Councillor, you're completely right, and that's why actually we did further testing and we went through the rather expensive piece of what we've just been through. It's the fact that we weren't happy with what was submitted in 2019 to the Secretary of State. We wanted to test that was correct, and through that testing, we've actually looked at the road. We've actually now, the costing of the road as well. So you're quite right. We challenged it, and we've got the additional new work we've now got that proves that it does what it's supposed to do, and that it is at the right level to deliver the needs of the housing development in Billericay, and that those impacts will be positively impacted on Billericay and Billericay's transport network.
Thank you.
Councillor Charlotte.
As we've embarked upon the link road, do you want to cover some of those points off now, or leave it to a later?
Might just as well as we're on there.
As we've started the ball rolling on it. I mean, I think firstly, it might be useful just if we can understand the difference between a link road and a relief road, because previously the language was all around the relief road, and now it's suddenly changed to link road. I'm not entirely clear what the difference.
Lisa is probably obviously going that point.
A number of different terminology got used for this road throughout the process, and it's quite a long process with a number of different routes. Remember, we resolved to avoid the road that is affected on Thriftwood towards the end of the plan stage. So one of the reports we commissioned was the updated modelling, and that indicates to us really the primary function was a link road. That's the term the highway would use. Essentially, the road serves the allocations, and it also has this secondary benefit, providing another route through Billericay. but it's not a classic relief road where it goes and avoids the urban area completely. It's very tightly tied to the allocations which will move through the centre. So we've also used Spine Road, various link routes been used throughout the process. This single term link road is now being used, so we use a consistent terminology through both the plan and the evidence base, which most accurately describes the route as it is now, and the plans are submitted. Does that help answer the question?
Yeah, I think I get the point, the difference there. Do we? I've seen so many different estimates of how much it's going to cost. Do we have a really buttoned down estimate of how much the road is going to cost to provide? And as I understand it, it has to be provided by the developer. How on earth do we think that that's going to be covered off by Section 106?
The estimate for transport infrastructure for H17 is for all four sites for H17 is £25 million, and to deliver that link road. That compares to the full infrastructure cost estimate of £54 million for the whole of H17, the four sites. H17, the viability study, which I referred to earlier, has looked at this site as well as H12 and H11 as an example of viability, and the viability study does show that these greenfield sites are basically viable and can accommodate a significant amount of infrastructure cost.
Right. Okay. Well, so let's assume this did go ahead. I've got real concerns around the design of this road, particularly at the junction with Frithwood Lane and Tycon Road. It appears no longer be possible to use Tycon Road as a direct way in or out Billericay. The traffic will be forced to use the link road, use the link road. So that's, you talk about longer journeys, moving traffic to new pinch points. So, I mean, are we envisioning that this would be a road that HGVs would be using? And is it going to be able to accommodate that kind of traffic?
So when they looked at the modelling for this route and when they looked at the engineering report, the vehicles that they were first using is a articulated lorry vertical articulated lorry was taken down it and a refuse vehicle. So it was performed suitably with those vehicles as tests. So in terms of how it will sit within the broader area, this is not the final report, there'll be more detail come forward as this moves into delivery phase. There will be additional transport assessments required to look at the effects of the local area. And policy 1L, if I remember rightly, is what requires those reports to be submitted as part of the plan application process.
I mean, as I understand it, this whole allocation has to be subject to a master plan, and I would submit that will have to be pretty robust. But I think my final point on this one, obviously, as we mentioned earlier, a lot of us have been contacted by residents in the last few days as these documents have emerged, because you will appreciate if you live on Frithwood Lane and you see this image of your front garden disappearing, and by the looks of things, there's going to be at least one house will have to go completely. How is that going to be delivered? Are we looking at compulsory purchase then? And what kind of consultation will take place with the affected residents?
The road will fit generally into the existing highway because there's been over time some movement of the highway into Vineyards Gardens. Where there is required to be land assembly, will be land assembly, but the CPO approach is the last part of that. So there's actually a programme that you look at before you reach CPO, and the Highway Authority will go through those stages to ensure that the road can be delivered as early as possible in the development's life anyway. So that's all part of the development, the sort of the implementation phase of the scheme, and that will be dealt with during the master plan and also then following any further planning applications that come from there.
Councillor Baker.
I think I'm going to take it before I get to the point, and I apologise to the committee. We're far more elegant to dealing with this planning stuff than me. I'm just sort of pretty basic. Because I would hope for a start that were this development ever to see the light of day, that the road will be the first thing we'll be in, because that's the whole point about infrastructure first. We would want to see infrastructure being delivered before any development there, for sure. But a couple of years ago, I went down to Flickwood Lane. Let's call it Flickwood Lane rather than 817, 816. So I think that especially people who are watching from their comfy homes probably wouldn't have a clue what we're talking about. We're talking about Flickwood Lane. I've been there. I've seen that site. I'm not clear, which is why I asked about how robust we were with the traffic analysis that's been done, how it would work in practice, because to me, if we're talking about Flickwood Lane itself, I can't see how articulating lorries and huge amount of traffic would cope in going up there. It would certainly make an impact on the lives of the residents there. And I think that Councillor Moore alluded to the consultation process and examination in public, and I think that this is one area where I think the public should be making their position known, because in my view, the people that know the best about the ways in and out of an area are people that live in that area. People that know the best about, how the traffic works are the people that drive in and out every day, taking their children to school or going to work. And I think that what we should be doing is encouraging the public to respond to the examination public on this particular issue, so the planning inspector gets a fair view as to what the feeling is and what the sort of possible alternatives are. Because I do know that as part of the lobbying process, there have been some views expressed from people in the area as to what alternatives there might be and how it might work better for them. And ultimately what we want to be doing is delivering for our residents to get the developments that we're talking about, but also so it actually works for the people who live there. And I think also, just another point, it has been raised to me in the past, we also need to be cognizant the local plan goes on and on and on. And of course, while this development is hanging around like a bad smell, it does affect the property values of the people there. And we need to be cognizant of that as well.
Yes, thank you very much, Councillor Baker. Very good comment. Okay, shall I get back to the yes, so I'm now on page 76, 77. You're probably right, you probably have done it. So I'm on paragraphs 9.35, 9.36, 9.37, 38, 39, 343, sorry, 9.43, 9.44, and policy T2, improvements to highway infrastructure. We'll move to page 78, 79. So continues the policy there, and then we go to policy T3, improvements to footpath, cycling, bridleway infrastructure. Revision on 9.47, adding in 9.50, 5152. Page 80 and 81, paragraph 9.54, policy T3, and then paragraph 9.65, page 82 and 83, paragraph 9.67, 9.69, 9.70, 9.71, and policy T4. And then we come to development management policies. Page 84 and 85, much of that is 9.75 is deleted, much of it deleted, 9.76, then policy T5, and then we move to policy T6, managing congestion, paragraph 9.81, page 86, 87, policy T6, managing congestion itself, so policy. And then I move into policy T7, safe and sustainable access, paragraph 9.88, 89 and 91. Page 88 and 89. A revision to policy T7, and then we move to T8, parking standards, paragraph 9.93, 94. Policy T8, parking standards, a minor revision there. Page 90 and 91. Paragraph 9.102, 103, 106. And then policy T9, town centre employment areas. On subject everyone should be interested in, policy T10, electric vehicle charging infrastructure standards. Policy, paragraph 9.110, 9113, 9114, 9115. And then policy T10, electric vehicle charging infrastructure standards. Page 92 and 93, just a revision to the evidence base 9.120. That's the end of that chapter. And then we move to the chapter you've all been waiting for. Chapter 11, delivering a wide choice of high quality homes. Councillor Becker.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think that it's important to note we've gone through a fair amount of pages there before we come to the main course, and contained within there's a lot of stuff. There's stuff about making sure that people can cycle safely, recognising that people that want to walk and bridleway, that they can walk safely, addressing the economic development of the borough and creating jobs, looking at transport infrastructure, making sure that people can travel both around the borough and also elsewhere, managing congestion, which is something that we constantly see when we've got school runs going on. 9.91 recognises the fact that some people at a younger age or even at an elderly age might not be able to avail themselves of transport, and how we address that. And then of course T8, which is the final one where we were looking at, for instance, the parking standards, again something which is very, very dear to the majority of the borough's heart. And why I raise that is because, of course, I think there is the illusion that the local plan is just about housing, and it's not. The local plan is fundamental to the way of life and all the things that impact upon people's life right the way across the borough. And sometimes with the noise of the housing numbers and the item we're going to move on to, I think people forget that the local plan is far more than that, and something that actually we have to address and ensure that all the evidence is being gathered in order to ensure that we are making sure that the roads aren't congested, that there's adequate parking, that transport can be done, that people that can't necessarily have their own car are able to enjoy freedom of movement around the borough, that jobs are created. So it's just really underscoring the point the local plan is more than just housing.
Thank you, Councillor Bagot, for that.
Apologies, I just wanted to highlight, it appears one thing in here that should be showing as red as change is not, and that is point for policy T10, point 1C is no, and that's referring to fast or rapid charging points being required to instruct where cars are likely to try and stay short periods of time.
I'm sorry, Liz, I'm now confused.
Page 91.
This is.
Going back to T10, I think.
Policy T10,
Policy.
T10.
Right,
electrical charging vehicle.
yeah,
Point 1C
yeah,
should be showing as a change, it's a new requirement.
okay.
And up until it appears to turn back to black.
Right. Okay, thank you for that clarification. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Babbitt, for the outline of the other parts of the local plan, and not just housing. However, we do come to a chapter all about housing, the one that everyone's waiting for. So I'm on page 95, and the first revisions I have are paragraph 11.4, 11.5.
Sorry, Councillor, sorry, can we just be clear that 11, can we just be clear that 11.5 illustrates that rise in our allocation? Yeah, I just think it's important that for those at home that are watching it, you can see that those numbers have increased. 11.5,
Okay.
and they've increased significantly,
Yeah.
by almost 2,500 homes.
Would officers like to comment on that?
The overall need has gone up a lot, but what has gone up is the ability to provide supply to meet the need. And you remember at the previous SPI meeting we discussed town centre capacity, and a lot of that increase in supply is we're able to meet through town centre capacity. So that's the main source of additional supply. Brownfield land. Yeah.
Okay, I'll move on then to page 96 and 97. Some changes to numbers again on page 96, that's paragraph 11.8, 11.10, 11 and 12 and 13. And then we have a table on page 97. We've got revisions on 11.14, 15, 16 and 17. And then we go to policy H1, this is page 98 and 99. Where we do have a revision to the overall new homes identified there. And then we move to policy H2, specialist accommodation, 11.24. Revision there. And then I'm moving to page 100 and 101. Revisions are 11.35, 11.36, 11.37. And then page 100 to 103. 11.41 and 42 and 43. 11.45, 46, 47. And policy H3. And then page 104, 105. Policy H3 continues there. And I'm moving to policy H4. 11.51, 11.52. And then policy H4. Revisions to the policy. And I'm moving to page 106, 107. Housing growth in Basildon. This is policy H5, land west of Gardeners Lane South. revisions to 11.57, 5.8 and 5.9. And 11.61, 6.2 and 11.61 and 11.63, 6.4. And then policy H5 itself, vision care, education, childcare, and playing pitch requirements. Page 108, 109. Policy H7, land north of London Road Vange, 11.66, 11.67, 11.68, 69 and 70, 72, 73 and 74. On page 110, 111, I come to policy H7 itself, land north of London Road Vange. Some revisions to each of the points under that policy. Some cases very minor. And then I'm going to move to policy H8, West Basildon. Paragraph 11.76, 77, 78, 81, and then the policy H8 West of Basildon, the policy itself, some revisions. Then page 112, 113, policy H9 land west of Steeple View, paragraph 11.85, and policy H9 itself. With I.5, addition of sustainable transport, education and childcare in point 8. And then I'll move to 114 and 15, policy H10, paragraph 11.93. Then policy H10, land east of Note Bridge, Basildon, and point 4, 6 and 7 of the policy. It's got some minor revisions on grade 2 listed buildings and land for education and childcare use and so on. Okay. So policy 8, I'm moving to policy H11, east of Basildon, page 115, paragraph 11.1, 11.101, 102, 103, 104, 105, and 110 on page 117. Then policy H11, east of Basildon, revision 2.1, 3, 4, 5. And 6, 7, and 8. On page 118. Then I'm moving to policy H12, land south of Wickford, on page 119, paragraph 11.114, 116, 117, 118. Policy itself, Councillor Jack.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just looking at the 11.16, further down. Have we actually spoken to Essex County Council? But they're saying about it's going to generate education and childcare requirements, which is got the obvious. For the provision of the primary school, with only provision on staff. I mean, have we spoken to the education authority?
There's been ongoing work with the county council on matters related to both education, transport, and obviously flooding. And all the education requirements are that was set out by the education authority. So it's been these are what they require for these developments to come forward.
Okay, because, I mean, if we know how schools work, people will drop off their children at school in a car, most likely, however, it's not, they will walk through public transport. I mean, if you don't mind, Chairman, if I sort of strain my eye further down, I mean, we're looking at the infrastructure, and I've just seen the report here about the viability of the area. Have we been ambitious enough with the infrastructure here? Because previously it was a grade separated junction. What I'll be sure that just tinkering around the edges on the junctions there on 27 is what this scanned development actually needs. Because we said, you know, previously some of my Conservative colleagues have said about the robustness of the workings out for roads in Billericay. I'd certainly like the same robustness for this infrastructure in particular.
The work which, again, has been taken by the Highway Authority and has been obviously requested by the local authority to challenge that highway work that was done for the planners and positives, has led to the requirements for the highway improvements that is now set out in the enclosure set out in this report, and therefore the changes to the transport policies in the plan, and also then the requirements of the policies that sit within the housing chapter as well, relating to H12, H17 and other developments that are coming through. So these are all tested by the Highway Authority, who are trained highway matters. We're not highway engineers. So as far as we're concerned, the robust evidence provided by the Education Authority relating to education requirements and the highway requirements are robustly being challenged by the Highway Authority, and obviously we're taking those on board in delivering the maps in front of you.
When I searched the document for the junction itself, I was unable to find an estimated cost, but now I can see contributions that the fund would provide. I'd just like to make the request to officers that if we can have that conversation with Essex County Council, see if we're utilising this money as much as we should to deliver the improvements for down south of Whitford.
Obviously, we're not the Highway Authority. The Highway Authority will require the development to deliver the required highway improvements to allow development to come forward, to deal with the mitigation caused by the development itself, and also the background growth that the local plan as well. So that work will be required to deliver by the developer in delivering H12 and also other developments within the locality of H12 to ensure that the mitigation within Whitford is dealt with through these highway improvements.
Thank you. Councillor Morris.
What Councillor Jeffrey was just talking about, and we do also have a viability study that has been produced by Water Planning Economics. And if I look on page 109, it's talking about this particular plot of particular site, H12, and South Whitford. And it breaks down the value that the developer will be expected to produce for transport, for education, for healthcare, etc., etc. Now, I would expect the answer from the officers is that they have spoken to the various branches of Essex County, etc., to be able, or at least Porter have, to be able to come up with these figures. So can I just ask comment on that, please?
Yeah. Both the IDP and development plan, which we are currently, obviously it's a live document we're currently working on, and also the work that's taken by the viability company, that has been through consultation with the Highway Authority and Essex County Council through that process.
I thank you for your leave, Mr. Chairman. Just sort of picking up from Councillor Morris's point, the rationale was that when I looked at the infrastructure that's coming to the junction of the Dick Turner line, is that going to cost the amount of money that I see here in terms of improvement. I'm looking at around, perhaps it would be spread out, but if we're looking at improving the infrastructure provision in the south of Wicklow, particularly around this site, we should be saying to the Highways Authority, can you not be a bit more ambitious?
I mean, the Highway Authority looks at the level of growth in the area and looks at the highway network to see whether the highway network can fit to that growth. And what they have submitted, what we have now in front of us in terms of the highway work, shows the fact that the background growth and the growth within this area caused by these developments, what they're proposing fits that requirement. So that's what has been put forward by the Highway Authority in terms of their ability to provide a safe and sustainable network for transport to meet the whole local plan growth set out in the plan. I mean, that's what they can model, is basically what the growth looks like. So they've looked at the full plan growth sensitivity, and from that they worked out through modelling the fact that the junction, as required, set out in the work which forms part of the consultation documents, it will require a safe highway network for Wickford to deliver this housing growth.
Thank you. So I'm on page 119, policy page 12, and south of Wickford, and there's the policy there. On the change point 3, 6, and 7. I'm going to move to policy H13, land north of South End Road, Shopgate. Paragraph 11.120, 11.121, 11.122. Minor changes there. Page 121, paragraph 11.124, 125, and 126. And then the policy itself, land policy H13, land north of South End Road, Shopgate, and items 3, 4, and 6 have been revised. With that, we move on to page 122, 123, policy H14, land south of Barnpool, Wickford. Revisions to paragraph 11.127, 11.129, 11.131. Then the policy H14, land south of Barnpool, Wickford, and then revisions to 1, 3, and 5. Moving to policy H15, land north of London Road, Wickford, on page 123. Minor revision on 11.138. And then page 124 and 125, and paragraph 11.140, and then the policy itself, land north of London Road, Wickford. Item 4, just adding in sustainable transport, education and childcare on point 4. And now I'm going to move on to housing growth in Billericay, policy H16, land northeast of Potash Road, Billericay. Revision to 11.143, 11.145, and then policy H16 itself, land northeast of Potash Road, Billericay. Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, this particular one is in my board. I do have a couple of questions. Here, the change to point 2. So previously, it said access to this site must be secured from Potash Road utilising existing access points. It now reads as access to this site must be secured from Potash Road in accordance with the policies of the Highway Authority, and we deleted utilising existing access points. I find that weird because that's a change that seems designed to make the policy vaguer. And this is such an odd allocation anyway, it's quite a strange and checkered history, but the additional modifications confirm that access to the new estate will be from Potash Road. But now makes it open-ended as to where exactly they're going to be. Can officers shed any light on what the plan is there?
Pausing for a moment while officers have a discussion.
Councillor Charlotte, that amendment was actually undertaken prior to the document being submitted to the Secretary of State in 2019. So that's actually a carryover alteration that was done following the consultation in 2018 that led to that alteration. So it was a direct response to that consultation response with the Highway Authority at that point. Because what we're dealing with a plan that's, so what you've got in front of you is there are some alterations that were undertaken. So we've submitted a plan to the Secretary of State, and obviously there were some changes done to the plan following the consultation in 2018 that led to a plan that finally went in front of members and was then deposited with the Secretary of State in March 2019. What we've now got is suggested modifications of a modified plan already, the submission document, which is what you've got in front of you. So there are some modifications that were already accepted in 2000, when the plan was submitted in 2019, which was the deletion of that part was deleted, and the additional requirement to look at alternative access through the highway policy, and that may require the use of the existing access points, but also that would be to be dealt with at the development control stage, implementation stage for the highway authority. So it's not ruling out the existing access, but it's saying that it has to be in line. So those alterations were done at that point.
Okay, so I think I understand when the alterations come about. I'm still not sure I really understand how it helps in terms of making the document make any sense. But I appreciate that comes at the development stage, but you could appreciate how from the lay observer from the outside, this is a really bizarre situation for people who are concerned about the effect that this particular allocation is going to have on Potash Road, because we've sort of connived at a position where no one knows how this site is going to be accessed, and I don't really understand how that's a particularly desirable position to be in. And if I can make the general point, this particular allocation is right at the northern tip of my ward, which of course is the northern tip of the borough. And this particular location is, because of that fact, it is quite far removed from all the town's key facilities like the high street, schools, hospital, etc. So inevitably, this new estate is going to produce a lot of short car journeys. And I'm concerned that Potash Road is not going to be up to it. And I think we already know that there are pressures on Stock Road roundabout. And now there's a big question mark over the access arrangements. I think there's going to be a lot to overcome with this policy.
I think we probably agree with you. I don't know if officers want to make any more comment on.
And no, there's a few
Councillor Brown.
And wouldn't it be right in saying, obviously, that language is being changed throughout the report, wherever we, on the whole, where we notified of certain judges that it's come back and we've changed it, it's been changed to that language. This is not the only site where that language is being used.
I think that's probably right, and obviously, it's been changed in line with what the highway authority will require. So rather than actually, so the highway authority will define what sort of interacting with the code document in terms of making sure that it meets their needs in terms of how we can deliver the sites going forward.
So would you say that this is sort of their way of future-proofing this, or whatever their policy is at the time when this site comes forward, that our policies say we have to comply with whatever their policy is at the time?
That's probably correct, Councillor.
Yeah, and it's not something unique to this site at all, it's throughout the document.
Okay, so I carry on. Right. Page 126 and 127. Policy 872, Southwest Delivery. I'm on paragraph 11.149, 11.150, 11.151, 152, 153, 154, 158, 159. Yeah, I'll move on to page 128, 129. 11.161. Councillor Baggett.
Thank you, Chairman. I know you skipped 11.160. I know that's been the black stuff, and the black stuff's been there for ages, is what we're saying, the amendment. But when I read it, I know the black stuff's been around for some years now, since it was first submitted. It talks about GP provision in the wider area, and it says, and I quote, the NHS have a strategy of expanding provision to accommodate growth in existing surgeries. However, owing to level of development plans within Ripley, it is likely that a new GP hub will be required to serve residents this allocation. Consultation with the NHS will be needed to establish whether on-site provision will be required and to identify a suitable location for it with the allocation. If the NHS determines that an on-site provision is not required, all development will be expected to make a contribution toward the expansion of GP services in the area to serve the new residents. Now that's 3 years old. So what consultation is being conducted, and how confident are we that that comment still stands, given that we've had COVID, given we've had escalating problems with people accessing GP surgeries in Ripley already? I just wonder whether that is a paragraph that is in black, but actually needs to be either read or revisited to make sure it's current. It's not struck out, it's still there.
Yeah. No, it's the ones that are from the previous, struck out.
Christine's work, like me.
Oh, sorry, the ones that were from the previous, if you look to that 11, that's still in place. The ones which were taken out and previous, if you look above like 11.159, there's this allocation will require, that's what's struck out. 11.160 is still in play, so that's still there. And Philip could update you where we've got to with the NHS.
That's my point. It is still there, but it says consultation is required. And this was written at some point in the past. What I'm asking is, what consultation is being done, and does that need to be updated following whatever consultation has taken place? We did actually have a meeting very recently with the NHS on this subject, with the alongside the developer of H17B as well. So it's quite, whilst the text is 3 years old, certainly the issue hasn't been forgotten about, and the fact that there is a need for that kind of hub, health hub facility, I think is still very much needed. And in terms of the evidence base, is included in the infrastructure delivery plan, which is being finalised at the moment. So I think we're reasonably confident that there's still that need.
Councillor Morris.
again, looking at the viability study that talks about what's going to be needed for various plots of land, on page 109 is talking about H17, A, B, C and D. And amongst the other things it talks about is healthcare. So obviously there has been some sort of consultation done as to what sort of monies will be needed to provide healthcare for that plot of land.
No, thank you. I just think that I just wanted to make sure it wasn't something that has somehow slid through. It says consultation is needed. 3 years have gone on. We've got increasing waiting lists of GP surgeries. I just wanted to make sure that we were being encouraged in the situation.
Councillor Brown. No.
Sorry, yeah, if I could just nip back one to 11.159 on page 127. Now, this may again just be, as Councillor Brown said, as it's going to council future-proofing the document. I note that on that part of the policy, it stated that the early years and primary education provision would be set out on the parcel H17B, and now that's being changed again to make it a bit vague as to where it's going to go. It's a long paragraph here. I just wondered if officers could confirm. Again, the anxiety with this particular policy allocation is the need for the cooperation between the different developers that are involved there, because it's such a large application. And the worry there is what is in place to make sure that there's going to be a robust process to make sure the developers have to deliver this stuff, because of course you can appreciate when residents are looking at these modifications, anything that makes the plan a bit vaguer and a bit more open-ended, the fear is this is how the developer will then wriggle out of providing what they need to provide. So you just need that reassurance that the fact that it no longer says that this thing's going to go in H17B means it still does mean it still has to go somewhere.
I always dislike preambles to policy, because I think people look at those and think that's the policy. The actual policy is set up, so in weight terms, those discussions have got no weight. What you need to look at is what policy H17 says. And H17, we have removed the requirement for H17B, because what that was doing is that was creating a very difficult way to because the county got a very precise way of delivering schools now in terms of where of closest to roads and how they sit in the same transport sort of area. So by keeping it in H17B, we were actually creating problems with actually how the master planning could come forward. So there was a discussion that H17 is actually one allocation. It isn't A, B, C and D, it's actually H17. There shouldn't be A, B, C and D, and so we've taken it as that now. So H17 has to deliver the school and the early years, plus the early years additional space required in that policy. So in that master plan, which will come in front of yourself in the planning committee, you will see where the school will be located following a consultation with the education authority. Because obviously we're not allowed to say where it goes. It's the responsibility of be working with the developer, ourselves and the education authority that say where that school finally goes. And actually as Councillor Baggett will probably follow up when it's delivered in the development phase as well, because obviously we know from our own case of H6 Dry Street, they're not always delivered at the onset of the development, they're delivered some time later down the road. So I'll have indication as that part of that master plan when the school needs to be delivered as well. And the education authority delivers that position as well.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm heartened to hear that, because 3 years ago I raised concerns about this particular site. I'm not meaning to be disparaging to any developers who are watching, but when you've got 3 different developers, it's very easy for them to fall out or have disagreements and then do things piecemeal and get away with not delivering the infrastructure that's needed. So the fact the site now is one site with one infrastructure requirement is actually pretty good news, really, from my point of view, ensuring you get infrastructure first.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Brown.
Just because it's one site doesn't mean you have several developers within that site.
No, we have got certain developers in that site. What I'm saying is, whether the separate developers or not, whoever does it, the infrastructure requirement now stands as the infrastructure requirement. And it's not something where you can get mission creep with one developer saying, oh, we're only going to do this bit, therefore we don't have to provide the infrastructure. If you're developing on that site, you have to provide the infrastructure, end of.
Thank you for that, Councillor. And of course, the policy itself actually articulates some of that. We talk about here, it says, item 10 on page 129, the new primary school and early year and childcare provision is required to accommodate needs arising from the entire site, with all the developers contributing proportionately. So I think the policy is pretty robust.
I agree with it.
Okay, is there anything else on policy 817?
So Councillor Moore, can I also point, the point that I think Councillor Baggett made very clear earlier on, so you go down to policy 817.12, it does now clearly say the allocation will be expected to contribute to fully fund and delivery of the new link road. So that is now clearly in the policy requirement, Councillor Baggett.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll be done with policy 817. I'm going to move on to policy 818, land south of Windmill Heights, Billericay, page 130 and 131. What's the name? And it's paragraph 11.163, 165, 167. And then on the policy itself, there's a revision of addition to point 4, and a revision to point 6. Going to move on to policy H19, land east of Greens Farm Lane, Billericay. And there are revisions to paragraph 11.170, 171, 173, 174. Councillor Schrader.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as you know, I brought this up at a previous meeting. I was told to refer to it in this meeting, so that's what I'm going to do. I am concerned about the change to the extension of the nature reserve and it being changed to strategic open space. I've been trying to get my head around this since we discussed it at the meeting back in, I think, November, wasn't it? The issue I have with this is that the developer in question has been leafleting residents about this since 2013 and wasn't changed until 2018-19 to publicly accessible recreational land, and reference to an extension of the nature reserve has been struck out. Now, I remember Mrs. Lyons assured me land in question will still be protected under the new designation, and I take that at face value. But one point I wanted some clarity on was that it was my understanding that part of the policy was that this land would be given to the council. And the other, I got the impression at the last one that that's no longer the case, but that was certainly always my understanding. And the other point I wanted to raise was that I think at the November meeting, Mr. Lyons mentioned the nature reserve didn't want it. But surely the nature reserve is us. That's the council runs Mill Meadows. So do we not want it? It's my initial question.
The issue with the development is that the land, the allocation is in two parts. You've got a piece to the north and a piece to the south. and in the middle, you've got a swathe of, which is still greenbelt. So it's not, we haven't downgraded its function in planning, and it will become a mixture of open land. There'll be some public requirements in terms of open space, because the development itself will require a small portion of open space, and then the remaining of the land will stay as it currently is, and that would be the best way forward. If following the development there was a land transfer between the landowners and the council, the landowners and another party, then that can be decided during the implementation phase of the policy. It's very irregular for a policy to say what the policy said, and I don't know whether the policy itself requiring that would have been actually a sound policy. So therefore, the position we've taken is about the development itself, which is what the policy should look at. And I think the officers have added quite correctly in 5, which says the development should not negatively impact the SI site. That's really important. That's biodiversity at its pinnacle. And also, which we hadn't put in previously, also it would protect the heritage asset as well, which because the site is surrounded by a number of listed buildings.
Yeah.
So the issue of the gifting of the land is a matter that we deal with during the development phase. The protection of that land through its greenbelt position is protected. The land actually, and I know that site quite well because I remember walking on that site as a young planner when I was first here. The middle of the site is very undulating, and I don't think you get many houses on it anyway. So I think that it's almost undevelopable in terms of those terms. So it will not come forward. We're protecting it quite strongly. And if in future there is that, we can do some during the implementation phase of the policy, some land exchange with the landowner. That's the point at which the council can look at that requirement. I challenge the requirements for that to be in a policy right from the start, because I don't think it's actually a sound policy saying that we'll gift land. I don't think that would have got past the inspector. So what we've done is create a policy that the officers now think is a sound policy and meets the requirement of biodiversity and heritage impact of that quite delicate site, and it is a quite delicate site. So I think that the misnomer about whether whoever wants the land, I think is something we deal with at the implementation stage. We must ensure that the policies we protect the land correctly, which I think we now do with the policy as it stands.
I mean, to be fair, I had extensive conversations with both the Mill Meadows Society and the Milton Wood Society, and as far as I know, the developer is still liaising quite constructively with them, certainly as recently as the end of last year. I guess the concern is that because of the rewording, the worry was, I don't think anyone was particularly worried that the site would be developed, because as you say, I think the phrase used last time was undulating, which is such a nice word to say, isn't it? But it obviously makes it very difficult to put houses on it. But I think the concern was that the whole publicly accessible amenity space, it wasn't going to be like a playground or play equipment and that kind of thing. Because the really crucial thing for that site is the triple SI status of Mill Meadows, and that is preserved as a one drive corridor. So as long as you're giving me that assurance that it's not going to end up with swings and roundabouts on it and that horrible squishy stuff they put on the floor, then I'm relatively satisfied with it.
The team did I've done a lot of work on the biodiversity of a lot of the sites and the ecology of a lot of the sites, and that's why and also the heritage work, and that's why this policy then, as quite rightly now, actually has a very important part to it that we have to respect actually for the site, because anything that happens to the site actually itself will impact the site, or may impact, and you have to be aware of that and make sure the developer is aware of that. So the policy now, I think, and the work that sits behind the policy actually indicates that. So I think that was one that ethics so we've got the evidence base to protect the environments of this application.
Thank you.
We don't think we should have a policy on squishy stuff. So we were on page 132. That was policy H19, land east of Greens Farm Road. I'm now going to move to policy H20, land east of Southend Road, Billericay, page 133, and this is paragraph 11.180, 181, 182. And then I'm moving to the policy itself. East of Southend Road, Billericay, and on page 134, we have quite a change here on number 4 and a small revision on number 5. So that's any comments on that. So I'm going to move on to policy H21, self-billed allocations. This doesn't change too much. I'm on page 134, and this is paragraph 11.187 and 11.188. Adding in about the village conservation area, Great Thursday conservation area, 11.190 on page 135. And then policy H21 itself, self-billed allocations, and some minor revisions to points 1, 2, and 3. And I'm going to move to policy H22, housing growth in Craig's Hill. Page 136. No changes are proposed on this. Housing growth in Craig's Hill, policy H22, there are no changes to that. And then the development management policy, policy H23, no changes on page 137. Some minor changes to the policy itself, where we're changing point 1C above shops with shopping frontages, we change frontages to areas. Then I'm moving to policy H24, applications for gypsy and traveller sites and travelling show people yards. That's page 138. And we've added in an additional paragraph 11.210 about the Essex Design Guide. And then the policy H24 itself, applications for gypsy and travel sites and travelling show people yards, and that just adds under point 3, item J, considering the design principles set out in the Essex Design Guide. Councillor Blake.
Yeah, just a general one on the traveller one. Is there anywhere in here regarding transit sites, that policy on that part of the transit site? Have we put something in there saying we are not going to have or whatever?
Policy H3 addresses that one, so working together with Essex County Council, with authorities in Essex to provide the transit center council. It's a cross-boundary work rather than exclusive to council.
Okay, transit site provision is on page 103, 11.47, paragraph 11.47. And that says that I can't remember what BPLNAA stands for, has not identified a need for transit sites in the Basildon Borough. Okay, I'm now going to move on to policy H25, the size and types of homes. Page 140 and 141. Paragraph 11.221. The policy itself, policy H25, the size and types of homes. No change to that. And then policy H26 is for affordable housing provision. Paragraph 11.224 changes some of the definitions there in that paragraph. No change to page 143. And then 144 is the policy 826, affordable housing provision, and there's a revision to item 2 on that policy, and revisions to item 6C. With that, I'm now going to move to policy H27, houses in multiple occupation and the subdivision of family homes. There are no changes to that page and no changes to the policy. Then I'm moving to policy H28, maximising the housing stock, and there are no changes to that policy on page 146. Okay, I think we've done it. Okay. So we've now got to go to the recommendation. Councillor Morris tells me page 11. Okay, so the recommendations are that the committee firstly notes the additional evidence base and appraisals undertaken for the Basildon Borough Local Plan 2014 to 2034, as set out in enclosure number 4 to 38, which have informed the proposed modifications to chapter 6, 7, 9, and 11 of the local plan. Recommendation number 2 recommends the proposed modifications to chapter 6, 7, 9 and 11 of the Basildon Borough Local Plan 2014 to 2034 as set out in enclosure number 2, as well as the accompanying schedule of post-submission modifications as set out in enclosure number 3, be recommended to full council for approval for the purposes of the local plan post-submission modifications consultation. Item 3 notes, it is recommended that the committee notes that the infrastructure delivery plan, IDP, is treated as a living document and will be reviewed and updated as required to inform decisions on infrastructure delivery, and therefore delegates authority to the head of planning in consultation with the chairman of the Strategic Planning and Infrastructure Committee to approve updates to the IDP as required for the local plan examination. And I have an amendment to recommendation number 4. The amendment says, delegates authority to the head of planning in consultation with the chairman of the Strategic Planning and Infrastructure Committee to finalise and approve the consultation documents appended to this report as enclosures numbers 1 to 38, including to make non-material or minor amendments to the proposed documents where required. So, are members comfortable that we take all 4, including the amended recommendation for Councillor Baggett?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I don't want to sort of hold up proceedings too much, but I just wanted to be clear for those members of the public that don't necessarily do local government speak, that effectively this committee is moving things to council, and council will be voting not on the local plan, but on taking it out to consultation. I think it's important to reiterate that this consultation now puts the local plan in the public domain. The examination in public will take place, and this is really the public's opportunity to represent themselves with any issues they have with the local plan. And I would actually ask them all to do that. I know that there are some groups around the borough that are being set up. I would say that the information I've had from the planning inspector is that it is better for one representation to be made with a load of signatures than for a load of people to make a representation with one signature, and that if it is done in the latter way, it's less likely to have much weight for the planning inspector. I also just wanted to make a point which you alluded to on the consultation, which I know that initially the plan was for this to be only online. I want to thank officers for the hard work they've put in liaising with the planning inspector. We felt that doing it just online wasn't in keeping with how we would want to communicate and consult with the public. And I'd like to publicly thank both the officers and the planning inspector in changing that decision so that the public can have a better and more informative way of consulting with him on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patrick. If I may, I'll go back to the recommendation. So, are members happy to proceed with a vote on recommendations 1, 2, 3, and the amended recommendation 4? Yes. Okay. So, all those in favour, please show. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. So, thank you all for your valued input tonight. I would like to remind you all and those watching the video stream that, as I said at the beginning, and Councillor Baggett emphasised just now, there will be an online public consultation on the new and updated evidence base and the proposed modifications to the local plan arising from this evidence. As I said earlier, written representations will also be accepted. I would encourage council members and members of the public to participate in the upcoming consultation. Your views will go direct to the planning inspector, and it will then be for the planning inspector to decide whether the local plan is sound and can be adopted by the council. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank council officers for their support and guidance through the process tonight and for the previous 2 committee meetings. I know this has been difficult, particularly with COVID and the Christmas break, but thank you again. Thank you, everybody, and the committee meeting is now closed. Thank you.
Not